Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into the 2026 Moto2 Thai GP, and let me tell you, this was billed as the ultimate survival race. We're going to look at exactly how it was supposed to be a standard season opener, basically morphed into this incredibly unpredictable, chaotic, and honestly totally historic battle of attrition. Okay, so first, picture this. 60 degrees Celsius, that is roughly 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the literal peak temperature of the asphalt on race day. And when you mix an ambient air temperature of around 35 degrees with a track that hot, you are putting just a massive, unbelievable thermal load on both the riders and their Pirelli control tires. But, the heat was really only half the story here. The night before, this massive tropical squall washed completely over the circuit. So all that heavy rain just wiped away every ounce of rubber that had been laid down during practice and qualifying. Suddenly, these riders are staring down a boiling hot track with basically zero grip. All that weekend data? Yeah, you can go ahead and completely throw that out the window. Still, despite those absolutely treacherous conditions, they had to set a grid. So let's look at how the sharp end of the pack shook out in qualifying. Senna Agius put in a brilliant ride to grab pole position with a blisteringly fast 134.576 on his Calyx. I mean, he was absolutely flying, managing that low grip like an absolute pro. Right on his heels, Izan Guevara put his Bosco chassis into second, showing off some serious pace. And then Daniel Holgado rounded out the front row in third. This was just a huge moment for Agius. He really looked primed to completely control this race right from the front.
But actually, scratch that. The drama kicked off before the race even officially started. David Alonso, a guy who had just blistering race-winning pace all weekend long, got hit with a devastating post-qualifying penalty. This meant his starting advantage was totally stripped away, dropping him aggressively down the grid. So you have one of the main favorites suddenly forced to start deep in the pack. And in Moto2, where the aerodynamic margins are so incredibly thin and passing is already tough, starting near the back on a green, low-grip track is basically a nightmare scenario. It just added this massive layer of unpredictability to the whole starting grid.
And honestly, this quote right here pretty much sums up the entire vibe around the paddock once the dust finally settled. One of the greatest survival races in Moto2 history. Because, this wasn't just about who had the fastest engine or the smoothest corner speed anymore. It turned into a pure grueling test of who could literally just stay upright when the track and the elements were fighting them every inch of the way. That boiling asphalt, the green track, the opening round jitters. It was a literal pressure cooker just waiting to explode the second those starting lights went out. So let's take a quick look at the timeline, because we didn't get just one race. We essentially got 3 separate events crammed into a single afternoon. You've got the original start, race 1, which got red flagged on lap 4. Then race 2 gets going, only to immediately see another red flag on lap 1. And finally, race 3, which had to be slashed down to a frantic 7-lap sprint. Let's break down that initial chaos. In the original start for race 1, pole sitter Senna Agius gets a super clean getaway. He's looking incredibly strong out there. But then, lap 4, absolute disaster. Right as he's exiting turn 9, his bike suffers this sudden, severe technical issue, and he loses drive almost instantly. David Alonso, who was already aggressively carving his way through the pack, had literally nowhere to go. He slams right into Agius's rear tire, which triggers this violent high side that just launches him into the air. And as Alonso is tumbling off the track, Philipp Solik unfortunately gets collected in the crossfire. With bikes and debris everywhere, race direction had zero choice but to throw that first red flag. So they clean it all up, the riders regrid based on their lap 3 positions, and we get ready for the race 2 restart. And you could just feel the tension. These guys are cooking in the heat, running on pure adrenaline. The lights go out again, but yeah, no relief whatsoever. On the very first lap, right in that heavy braking zone of turn 3, a massive multi-bike pileup happens. Think about it. Their tires are barely up to temperature, everyone's desperate to make up ground quickly in a shortened race, and the margin for error is absolutely zero. So once again, bikes are all over the tarmac and the red flags come out immediately. By this point, the schedule is in ruins, and making riders sit on a grid in 60-degree heat is bordering on dangerous. So race direction makes a huge, drastic call. A third restart, but heavily slashed down to just 7 laps. Now, that completely transforms the event. 7 laps means there's no tire management strategy anymore. Nobody is pacing themselves. You've got those 140-plus horsepower Triumph engines screaming, and every single rider is just pushing at 110% from the split second the lights go out. It turned into an absolute no-holds-barred dogfight.
And wow, did that sprint deliver one of the most intense battles we've seen in the modern Moto2 era. It basically boiled down to this fierce edge-of-your-seat duel between Manuel Gonzalez and Izan Guevara. Guevara gets a brilliant start and leads for a good chunk of the sprint, really maximizing the cornering speed on his Yamaha-backed bike. But Gonzalez, he was relentless, just stalking Guevara, sizing him up through those high-speed sectors up Buriram. When the race is that short, you can't wait for the other guy's tires to drop off. You just have to force the issue. They were trading paint, swapping lines, and basically giving a masterclass in pushing right to the very edge of the grip limit on a scorching hot track.
Coming out of that final corner, it was just a pure drag race to the line. And Gonzalez manages to get the drive, tucks right into the slipstream, and edges out Guevara for the win by 0.099 seconds. I mean, less than a tenth of a second separated victory from defeat after 3 starts, massive crashes, and just unbearable heat. What a breathtaking finish. It perfectly capped off that frantic 7-lap sprint and totally cemented Gonzalez as a major title contender for the season.
Let's run through the final top 5 for the guys who actually survived this dash to the flag. So Manuel Gonzalez takes the top step, obviously with Izan Guevara just a heartbeat behind him in second. Daniel Holgado crossed in third, just 0.454 seconds off the lead, grabbing a super well-deserved podium after a chaotic afternoon. And then Ivan Otola and Colin Vaijer rounded out the top 5. Just look at those tight time gaps. The top 3 were covered by less than half a second. Simply surviving the crashes was one thing, but keeping up that kind of elite, razor-sharp pace in a shootout like that, it really shows you just how insanely talented this Moto2 field is.
But just when you thought the Thai Grand Prix was totally done throwing curveballs, the wildest twist happens off the track. Normally, you win a Grand Prix, you get 25 championship points, right? Well, when the official standings dropped, Manuel Gonzalez was only awarded 12.5 points. So why on earth did the winner only get half the points? This decision absolutely sent shockwaves through the paddock. It left fans completely baffled and turned this massive, hard-fought victory into a huge question mark for his championship campaign.
Well, the answer lies in the FIM rulebook. Because of those 2 red flags, the final race had to be slashed to just 7 laps. Now, the regulations state that if a race is stopped and the total laps completed don't meet the mandated minimum distance, which is usually 2/3 of the originally scheduled race, full points cannot be awarded. Since they fell way short of that lap threshold, the FIM had to trigger the half points rule. It doesn't happen often, but it's a strict rule. It means every single rider who scored in the top 15 walked away with exactly half the points they normally would have earned.
And that leaves us with literally the most bizarre post-Round 1 championship standings we've seen in years. Manuel Gonzalez leads the 2026 World Championship, sure, but instead of sitting comfortably on 25 points, he's got 12.5. Izan Guevara has 10 points for second, and Daniel Holgado is in third with 8 points. All these guys risked life and limb in brutal conditions, and they walk away with significantly less reward than they fought for. What it does do, though, is compress the championship standings incredibly tightly right out of the gate. Nobody has managed to build any kind of meaningful points buffer.
Which brings us to the real burning question. Will this chaotic half-point start define the entire 2026 title fight? Think about it. When we get to the season finale in November, if the championship is separated by just 2 or 3 points, everyone is going to be looking right back at the scorching asphalt of Buriram. Will Manuel Gonzalez regret losing those 12.5 points through absolutely no fault of his own? Or is this hyper-compressed leaderboard going to spark the most aggressive, closely fought season in Moto2 history? I don't know, but one thing is for sure, the 2026 season has started with a massive bang. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we continue unpacking the incredible world of motorsports.